Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we started our discussion related to IOC container. Okay, IOC stands for inversion of control. It is going to manage and collaborate dependencies among the classes in our application. Now, so we developed one application by using strategy design pattern, and we are able to develop the classes with loosely coupling. But still, in order to test that application, we are creating the objects and we are injecting the objects. So dependent class object we are creating and a target class object we are creating, and we are injecting dependent class object into target class object by using setter method. So if we do the injection by using setter method, then that is called as setter injection. If you inject the dependent object into target object by using constructor, it is called as constructor injection. If you inject by using variable, then it is called field injection. Right. Here, if we develop the project without using Spring framework, then as a programmer, we are responsible to perform the dependency injection among the classes in our application. If we develop the project without using Spring framework, then programmer should perform dependency injection among the classes in the application. As a programmer, if we perform the dependency injection, then classes will become tightly coupled. If a programmer performs the dependency injection, then classes will become tightly coupled. In real-time project, we will have hundreds of classes. Then performing the dependency injection is very difficult, and the code will become cumbersome because thousands of classes will be available. Managing the dependencies is very difficult. So instead of we are managing the dependencies, we can use the Spring framework. In the Spring, we have a IOC container which will manage dependency injection. Okay, so dependency injection means we understood the process of injecting one class object into another class object is called as dependency injection. That will be taken care by IOC container. So now what is this IOC? IOC is a principle which is responsible to manage and collaborate dependencies among the classes in the application. IOC stands for inversion of control. DI stands for dependency injection. Here if you see, IOC will perform the dependency injection, but for that IOC, we need to provide the information. How we need to provide the information? We need to give the Java classes as the input for IOC, and we need to provide configuration also as a input for IOC, right? Now, so how many ways we can give the configuration as the input for IOC? We can give through XML, through Java configuration, through annotations. XML configuration, that means we can tell to the IOC which classes it has to manage, which is a target, which is a dependent. That information we need to provide for IOC, because in our application, hundreds of classes are available, thousands of classes available. IOC don't know which is a target, which is a dependent, and how to perform dependency injection. So for this, we need to create a configuration. That configuration we will supply as a input for IOC container. We need to create the configuration. That configuration will help the IOC to understand how to manage the dependencies. That means which is a target, which is a dependent, which target, which dependent should be injected into which target, whether to use a setter or constructor, how to inject by it should perform the dependency injection through setter method, through constructor. That information we need to provide through XML configuration or Java configuration or annotation configuration. Then IOC container is going to take care of that and perform the DI, and it will provide the beans. So what is a bean? Bean is nothing but the class which is managed by IOC container is called as a Spring Bean. Spring Beans are ready to use. That means you can execute the classes. Those classes are managed by IOC container. Got my point? Fine. Now let's get started and develop one application using our Spring framework with IOC container and dependency injection. Building first application using Spring framework. Building first application using Spring framework. So as of now, we have created the projects, normal Java projects. We have not used Spring. So now I'm going to create my application by using Spring framework. Here guys, open STS IDE, and create Maven project. Open STS IDE and create Maven project. Second one, add Spring context dependency in project pom.xml. Now here I want to use a Spring framework. That Spring framework developed by some company, right? So we need to use that Spring framework in our project. So our project should have the jars of the Spring. Either you can download the jars and you can add it, or you can go for Maven. I'm going for Maven. I will add that dependency in my pom.xml. Let's observe carefully. So this is my IDE. I'm going to create the application new Maven project. Guys, see here, file, new Maven project. Create a simple Maven project. Skip archetype selection. That means I'm going to create a normal Maven application, standalone Maven application. Click on next. Group ID, you can give anything. I'm giving it as in.AhokIT. Artifact ID is the project name, 04 Spring, first Spring app. Let me take it as first Spring application. First application we are creating by using Spring framework. Click on finish. So now the project got created. Now here inside this project, if you see src main Java, main resources, test Java, test resources, JRE, like this, there are some folders. There is some folder structure available. Guys, when we create this Maven application, when we create this Maven application, by default it is taking Java 1.5. We can change that also. Go to build path, configure build path, libraries, click on edit. Currently there is JRE available, but actually we need to have the JDK on the build path. So right click on the project, build path, configure build path, libraries. So try to edit this library. JRE is available now. I need to add JDK. Currently JDK not added to this IDE. Click on installed JREs, add, next, add the JDK path. Go to C, program files, Java, JDK. Select this folder, finish. Select the JDK, apply, close. Now JDK is coming to here. Now I added JDK 1.8 for the build path. That's fine. Next one, come to pom.xml file. So it's a simple pom.xml file is available. It is a Maven configuration file, guys. So project is the root tag. Then inside this, so we need to have dependencies. We need to add. Now I need to add the Spring dependency here. I need to add the Spring dependency. For that, I'm going for mvnrepository.com, mvnrepository.com that I'm using here. Okay, mvnrepository.com I'm using. There we can write Spring context. There we can write the Spring context. Search now. Click on the Spring context. The current version of the Spring 5.3.2, that is the latest version of the Spring. Click on 5.3, copy this dependency, add in the pom.xml. Nothing but we are telling the Maven to download Spring context dependency. We are telling the Maven to download Spring context dependency, group ID org.spring framework, artifact ID Spring context, version 5.3.20. That means we are adding Spring framework to our project. Now, when I add the Spring context, Maven is performing the transdiv dependency management. Not only context, it is downloading Spring AOP, Spring Beans, Spring Core, Spring JCL, Spring Expression. All the required jars from the Spring framework, it is downloading. So with this, we are able to create the project and we are able to add the dependency, right? Like this, you need to add the dependencies. Open STS IDE and create Maven project, right? Then add the Spring context dependency in the project pom.xml, and we are having dependencies here. Inside that, there is a dependency, group ID, artifact ID, and version. So once it is done, the next thing is create our classes. So what are the classes we have? Already we have created the classes. Now I'm just going to copy those existing classes only. No need to create once again. Just I will copy the existing classes into this package. Credit card payment.java, debit card payment.java, UPI payment. So there are classes available. Now I am copying those classes. I'm copying those classes. Now iPayment interface is available. For that interface, we have implementations, project, clean, bill collector is available, and iPayment is a interface. UPI payment implements iPayment. Credit card payment is available. Right now. So what are the classes we developed previously? I'm using the same classes in this project, but this time I will not do the dependency injection. I will ask my IOC container to do the dependency injection. Interface is available, which is iPayment. Then credit card payment is implementing that iPayment. We are overriding string pay method. Debit card payment is available. It is also overriding pay method by implementing iPayment. Similarly, UPI payment is available. UPI payment is implementing iPayment and overriding pay method. Next one, bill collector class. This is our main target class. In the bill collector, we have iPayment as a reference with the payment variable. So this is our dependent. Our dependent bill collector wants to talk to pay method. Pay method is from the interface. That method is implemented by some classes. So here we need to inject one dependency object into this variable. I have a setter method and I have a constructor. I can do setter injection or I can do constructor injection. But actually we are doing the dependency injection manually. I'm creating the dependent class object. I'm creating the target class object. I'm injecting the dependent into target and I'm calling the method. But do I need to do all these things now? Do I need to do these things, or IOC container should perform this dependency injection now? Do I need to perform the dependency injection now? IOC container should perform the dependency injection. IOC container should perform the dependency injection. So here, as of now, what I have created, simple. I have created one Maven project and I have added context dependency in the project pom.xml. This is the dependency Spring context dependency. Jar files, Spring jar files we are downloading, which are required to develop our application using Spring framework. Third step, create bean classes. So here I have created iPayment.java. Then we created credit card payment.java, debit card payment.java, and we created UPI payment.java. Then we created bill collector.java. Then we are creating test.java. So these are the classes we have created in our application. All of you clear with these 3 steps? Creating a Maven project, adding a dependency. Why we are adding this dependency? In our project, we want to use the Spring. So Spring developed by somebody, right? We need to download the Spring and we need to use the Spring classes. For that, Spring dependency is required. So we have added that Spring dependency. We have added this Spring dependency in our project. Spring context dependency. Spring context dependency will provide the support to manage the configurations required for our Spring application. Spring context dependency will provide the support to manage configurations required for our application. Then we are creating bean classes because these classes will be managed by IOC containers. So we will call them as the bean classes, or we can call them as create required classes in the application. Create required classes in our application. So we are developing application for bill collection. So we can create the classes, create required classes in our application using strategy design pattern. Are we following strategy design pattern to develop the classes? Guys, are we following strategy design pattern to develop the classes? Yes. We are using composition instead of inheritance, and we are using interfaces instead of classes directly, right? Create required classes in our application using strategy design pattern. That is fine. Next one, create beans configuration file. Create beans configuration file. That file we will give as the input for IOC container, because as we discussed, IOC should understand our classes and which is target and which is dependent. We need to configure our classes. We need to configure our classes in the configuration file. Okay, so once your classes are created, then create beans configuration file. That file we will give as the input for IOC. Now observe, all the classes are ready. Next, in this main Java folder, I'm going to take new bean configuration file. Guys, see here in src main Java, I'm creating my configuration file. So what is that? Spring bean configuration file. Click on this. You can give any name for that file. I'm giving that as springbeans.xml. You can give any name for that, springbeans.xml. I have created my beans configuration file. So in this file, beans is the root tag, Inside that we can configure our beans. Now we need to represent our Java class as a Spring Bean. To represent Java class as a Spring Bean, we will use one tag called bean tag. Bean tag we are going to use to represent Java class as a Spring Bean. Bean ID is equal to credit card. Class is equal to credit card payment. This one I'm representing as one Spring Bean. So how to represent one Java class as a Spring Bean? In the beans configuration file, we have a root tag called beans. In that we need to write a bean tag. Bean ID is equal to credit card and the class is equal to credit card payment. So which class you want to represent as a Spring Bean? We are configuring that by using bean tag. This is called as bean definition. This is called as a bean definition. Credit card payment. Next one, bean ID is equal to debit card. Bean ID is equal to debit card. Class is equal to debit card payment. Class is equal to debit card payment. ID can be anything which should be unique. When you are configuring a bean definition, bean ID can be anything. That ID should be unique in the configuration file. Next one, bean ID is equal to UPI payment. UPI. Class is equal to UPI payment. Class is equal to UPI payment. Yes. Are we able to understand how to configure Java class as a Spring Bean in the XML? How to write a bean definition? Are you able to understand how to write a bean definition? Here, whenever we are writing a class, we need to write the class with a fully qualified name. That means package name dot class name. This class is available in which package? Credit card payment is my class name. In.AhokIT is my package name. If you see the classes, credit card payment, this is the class name and this is the package name. When you configure the class as a Spring Bean, you need to provide fully qualified name. That means package name dot class name. Package name dot class name we have to provide. Are you guys clear with my point? Yeah. ID is just a reference, guys. ID is just a reference. Now, here I'm writing bean ID is equal to bill collector. Bean ID is equal to bill collector. Class is equal to bill collector. Class is equal to bill collector. Class is equal to bill collector. Right. Now, guys, in our application total, how many classes are available? In our application total, how many classes are available? Can you tell me now? In our application total, how many classes are available? Bill collector is one class. In our project total, if you see here, in our project total, iPayment one interface, credit card payment, debit card payment, UPI payment, 3 implementations, and one target, which is bill collector, So total, how many beans available? Can I say total 4 beans available in our application? Can I say total 4 beans available in our application? Yes, those 4 beans I have configured. Those 4 beans I have configured in the beans configuration file. Bean ID is equal to credit card. Class is equal to credit card payment. That means this is the class I want to represent as a Spring Bean. For that, I'm giving one ID. ID is just like a reference. ID is just like a reference. Next, debit card payment and UPI payment, bill collector, like that. We have 4 classes. Now, what we need to tell to IOC? We are already telling the IOC to represent these classes as bean classes. Now, we need to tell to IOC, hey, IOC, you inject one object into bill collector class payment variable using setter method. Now, I want to tell to IOC container to perform setter injection and inject one class object into this variable. So I need to tell to IOC to call the setter method to perform the setter injection. Are you guys getting my point? I configured 4 classes as a Spring Beans. So what is a Spring Bean? The Java class which will be managed by IOC container is called as a Spring Bean. I have configured 4 classes here as a Spring Bean. Now, if I configure the 4 classes here, IOC container will create the objects, right? IOC container will create the object for these classes. But which object should be injected to which object? Which is a target, which is a dependent, and how to perform the dependency injection? That instruction we should provide for IOC container. Okay. Now, I want IOC to perform setter injection. I want IOC to perform setter injection. For which class it has to perform the setter injection, guys? Can you tell me? What is our target class here? What is our target class? For which class it has to perform the setter injection? Our target class is bill collector. In the bill collector, it has to inject one object by using setter method. So it has to perform setter injection. What is the variable name? For which variable we have a setter method to perform setter injection? Payment. Yeah, observe. Now, inside the target class bean definition, I'm going to write one tag called property. Property name is equal to payment. Ref is equal to credit card payment. Now see here, I'm writing property name is equal to payment. Ref is equal to credit card payment. This line will tell to IOC container, in the bill collector, there is a payment variable. For that payment variable, you need to call the setter injection by passing credit card object. Credit card, this is a reference. This reference belongs to credit card payment class object. So here, property tag will represent setter injection. Ref represents which class object should be injected by calling this setter method for the given variable. Here, property represents setter injection. Can you see this configuration and understand? Credit card payment configured as one Spring Bean. Debit card payment configured as one Spring Bean. UPI payment configured as one Spring Bean. Bill collector configured as one Spring Bean. Inside the bill collector bean, we configured a property tag. Property name is equal to payment. Ref is equal to credit card. So what is the meaning of this property tag? Property tag will represent setter injection. Property tag will represent setter injection. Property tag will represent setter injection. For which variable it has to perform the setter injection? This is the variable name I have configured. Property name is equal to payment. Ref is equal to credit card. Payment is the name of the variable in the target class for which we have a setter method. Ref is equal to credit card. Credit card is a ID belongs to credit card payment class. So that reference we are representing. So the meaning of this property tag is inside the bill collector payment variable is available. For that, it has to call the setter method by passing credit card payment class object as a parameter. So this is the setter injection that we are giving as a information to IOC to inject credit card payment object into my bill collector class. This is the information we are giving to IOC container to inject credit card payment class object into bill collector class by using setter method. That means I'm telling to IOC to perform setter injection. I'm telling the IOC to perform setter injection. Are you clear with the configuration? Guys, first time we are doing, maybe some confusion will be there, don't worry. So we will develop several applications so to get the clarity on this configuration, because when we are doing this for first time, some confusion will be there. Okay, so no need to worry about it. All right, so with this we have created our configuration. Create beans configuration file. Create bean configuration file and configure our classes as Spring Beans. Create beans configuration file and configure our classes as a Spring Beans. So like this, we are configuring this: credit card payment, debit card payment, UPI payment, and bill collector. Bill collector completed. Now, what is the next step? Guys, can you guess what is the next step? What is the next step? Project created, dependency added, required classes created, beans we configured. We need to start the IOC container, and test the application. Injecting the beans will be taken care by IOC. Now we need to start the IOC container. We need to start the IOC container and we need to provide this information, this XML file, whatever the file is available, we should provide the information to IOC container. Okay, here there are several ways available to start the IOC container. One is by using bean factory. Second one is by using application context, annotation config application context, reactive application context, web servlet application context. Like that, there are multiple ways available to start the IOC container. Okay, there are several ways available to start the IOC container. One of the approach is bean factory. One of the approach is bean factory. Bean factory is an interface. Bean factory is equal to new XML. Bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory. Bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory. It is already deprecated. This is already deprecated. So we can go for application context concept to start the IOC container. Okay, that is deprecated now. Let me go with application context then. Application context is equal to new class path XML application context. Application context is equal to new class path XML application context, and we need to provide our beans configuration file as a input. We need to provide beans configuration file as a input. What is our file name? Our file name is spring-beans.xml. Our file name is springbeans.xml. Now, guys, here I am creating object for application context. So what is this application context? I'm creating the object for application context. Application context is an interface. Application context is equal to new class path XML application context springbeans.xml. That means I'm giving my beans configuration file as a input for IOC container. I'm giving my beans configuration file as a input for IOC container. This IOC container will read all the bean definitions available in the beans configuration file, and it is going to create the objects. It is going to create the objects. Now tell me, do I need to create the object or IOC will create the object? Do I need to create the object for the classes or IOC will create the object for my classes? IOC will create the objects for my classes. In my project, 1000 classes will be available. Then how IOC will understand for which class it has to create the object? In our project, thousands of classes will be available. How IOC will understand for which classes it has to create the object? The configuration file is available. It is going to read the XML. IOC will not bother about how many classes available in the project. IOC will bother about how many bean definitions are available. So how many bean definitions available? How many bean definitions available? 4 bean definitions available. So for how many classes it is going to create the object? For how many classes it is going to create the object? For 4 classes only, it is going to create the object. Okay. IOC container will read that bean configuration file, will understand the bean definitions. For the bean definitions, it is going to create the bean objects. Now, is it just going to create the objects or it is performing dependency injection also? It is performing dependency injection also. How the IOC will understand that it should perform dependency injection? How IOC container will understand that it should perform the dependency injection? Did we specify that in the configuration? Did we specify that in the configuration? Yes, right. We used property tag. What is the meaning of property tag? What is the meaning of property tag? Property tag will represent setter injection. Very good. So now application context is a interface. Class path XML application context is the implementation class. What is this class path XML application context? The meaning of this class is it has to read the XML file available in the class path of the application to start the IOC container. Are you guys getting my point? Class path XML application context. That means we have the XML file. We have a XML file for the configuration. It has to read that XML file. It has to read that XML file from the class path and should start the IOC container with this XML as an input. In this XML, there are 4 bean definitions available. For those bean definitions, it is going to create the objects, and here property tag available for bill collector. That means it will perform the setter injection for the bill collector class payment variable by injecting credit card payment object. That is the meaning of the configuration. All right. So here we started IOC container by giving XML file as an input. Now we need to get the object from the IOC. We need to get the object from the IOC. In order to get the here, are we creating the object or we are getting the objects? We are going to get the object. Which bean object we want to get? Our bean name or bean ID is a bill collector. It is belongs to bill collector dot class. It is belongs to bill collector dot class. This is BC. Okay. Now here come down BC dot collect payment some amount. Understand here, am I creating the objects and injecting the dependencies, or Just I'm getting the object and calling the method. What is the purpose of getBean method? What is the purpose of getBean method? I'm just getting the object based on ID. Bill collector is the ID because IOC container is reading some definitions and creating the objects. So for every bean, we have given one ID. I want to get the object from the IOC context.getBean of ID. This ID belongs to which class object? That is belongs to bill collector. That is the type I'm specifying. This bill collector ID belongs to which class? I'm specifying that. So context.getBean of bill collector dot class. I got the bill collector object, bill collector dot collect payment. Now execute this. Execute this. Run the program. Payment successful through credit card. Are we able to execute our application? Are we able to execute our application? Now tell me, in the entire project, am I creating object anywhere? In the entire project, am I creating object anywhere? My classes are tightly coupled. My classes are loosely coupled now. My classes are tightly coupled. My classes are loosely coupled. My classes are 100% loosely coupled because I am not creating the object anywhere. I am not injecting the object also. I'm not creating the object anywhere and I'm not injecting the objects also. Everything is managing by IOC container. Everything is managing by IOC container. Just our now the difference between the previous example and this example. In the previous example, in the test class, we have created the objects and we have done the dependencies. I created the credit card object. I created the bill collector. I injected the credit card into bill collector manually. But today, I'm not doing that. I have created one configuration file. In that configuration file, I configured my Spring Beans, credit card payment, debit card payment, UPI payment, bill collector. Bill collector is my target. In the bill collector, I want to inject credit card payment. For that, I have taken property tag. Property name is equal to payment, ref is equal to credit card. Now, whatever the bean configuration file got created by us, that file we will give as the input for IOC container. Then IOC container will read the bean definitions and will create the objects, will perform dependency injection. So what is our duty? Start the IOC container by giving that XML file as the input that we have created. Okay, then get the object from the IOC by using ID context.getBean of the bill collector ID. That bill collector ID belongs to which class object? I'm specifying that as a bill collector dot class object. Once we got the bill collector object, that means dependency injection also completed by IOC, object created by IOC, dependency injection completed by IOC. We are just getting the object from the IOC. To get the object from the IOC, we are calling a method context.getBean of bean ID and bean class type. Once we got that bean object, then we are calling the method collect payment. So now when I call this method, it is doing the execution. The project is getting executed. It is saying payment is successful through credit card. For example, if I want the debit card payment, do I need to touch my Java program? If I want to do the debit card payment, no, I'm not creating the object. I'm not injecting the objects here. If I want to do the debit card payment, just take this debit card payment ID, ref is equal to debit card. Debit card payment ID is available now. Take this debit card, give it. Ref is equal to debit card. I'm telling to IOC to inject a debit card object into bill collector using property tag. Go to the test class and run this project. Run as Java application. Now payment is successful through debit card. Now the thing that you need to understand, as a programmer, am I creating the object or I'm not creating the objects? Am I creating the objects in my application? I'm not creating the objects in my application. I'm not creating the objects. Am I performing the dependency injection or I'm not performing the dependency injection? Am I performing the dependency injection? I'm not performing the dependency injection. No, I'm not creating the objects. I'm not performing the dependency injection. Who is doing that? Who is doing the object creations and dependency injections? IOC container is doing that. How we are starting the IOC container? Can you tell me? Which class we are using to start the IOC container in this application? Class path XML application context. What is the input for IOC today? What is the input I'm giving for IOC? XML file. What is there in the XML? Bean definitions are available. How to get the bean object from IOC? How to get the bean object from IOC? Context.getBean. Okay, so here as a programmer, we are not creating the objects. We are not managing the dependencies. Everything will be taken care by IOC container. So IOC is responsible to manage. IOC container is responsible to manage dependencies among the classes. Are you clear with our first application? Why I kept that class here? Huh? Sir, if you see the syntax of the method, context.getBean, which bean object you want to get, required type. I'm using this method, getBean, name, mean ID of the bean. That bean belongs to which class? Class type we have to specify, required type. What is the bean name or bean ID? My bean ID is bill collector. This ID belongs to which class? This ID belongs to which class? That class type we have to specify. Then it will understand that I am asking a bean with ID bill collector. It is belongs to bill collector class. Once I got the bill collector, then I am calling collect payment method. I'm calling collect payment method. Here I have given the steps very clearly. Open STS IDE and create Maven project. Add the Spring context dependency in the project pom.xml. This dependency you have to add. Create required classes. So this is the interface and these all are the classes. Create bean configuration file and configure our classes as a Spring Beans. This is our beans definitions. These are the beans definitions. Then start the IOC container and test the application. So here I'm creating class path XML application context. I'm giving Spring Beans.xml file as the input. Then bill collector bean I'm getting and I'm calling collect payment method. So with this, our first application completed. We are able to test that application also. It is working as expected. So in the tomorrow session, we will understand more internals, how IOC is getting started, how the objects are getting created, how the dependency injection is happening. Those concepts in detail we are going to understand. The internals of the IOC we are going to understand in the tomorrow session. Now I'm uploading these notes, guys, so please practice this example before coming to tomorrow session. So tomorrow we will understand internals of that IOC container, building first Spring application, building first Spring application. I'm uploading these notes. Let me save this file. Okay. Yep. So the notes uploaded to the portal. So please do download and practice this before coming to tomorrow session. I want everybody to develop this first application before coming to tomorrow session. Guys, every project will execute successfully in my system because we have a lot of experience in this Spring and Spring Boot. When you do the practice, then problems will come. So please practice before coming to tomorrow session. So if you have any problem, we will discuss that in the tomorrow session. And tomorrow we will understand more internals of this IOC, how it is getting executed and all. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll continue in the tomorrow session. Bye bye.